Serious new question tonight in the Russia scandal. Is Robert Mueller actually getting ready to serve President Trump with a subpoena?
That is one of the many developments in the Russia investigation, and we're on top of all of them tonight. KCAL 9 political reporter Dave Bryan joins us now with those late details. Dave?
Yeah, and you definitely get the feeling from these disputes now that this is probably in the closing stages of the Russia investigation. The long list of major new developments in that investigation just keeps on growing tonight. At the top of the list is right now is the threat of a presidential subpoena, the details of which are just now becoming clear. The Washington Post reports the S word came up in the course of a tense meeting in early March, where President Trump's lawyers declared that he was not obligated to talk with federal investigators under any circumstances. And special counsel Robert Mueller responded by pointing out that if Trump declined to answer the questions, the special counsel could subpoena the president to appear before a grand jury instead. Washington Post reporter Josh Dawsey, who worked on the Post report, told CNN Tuesday about the exchange.
A couple of months ago, there was kind of a breakdown in negotiations, and at one meeting, the special counsel's team raised the idea of a subpoena, provoking an angry reply from John Dowd, who was then the president's lawyer, who basically said, you can't screw around with the president of the United States. This is serious business. And the kind of talks broke down over a presidential interview.
I think where we're going is to a subpoena.
Constitutional law expert Alan Dershowitz told CNN's Anderson Cooper it would be to President Trump's advantage to testify under subpoena rather than voluntarily.
I think right now the president's legal team should have no interest in answering these enormously broad questions voluntarily. They'll get the same broad questions artfully asked at a grand jury, but at least they'll be able to challenge the entire process of subpoenaing the president. I think they will win on some areas of questioning.
The possibility the president could be subpoenaed to answer questions in the Russia investigation comes at a time when there are already 19 indictments, including some of the president's former top advisors. And it seems to be heading toward a showdown between special counsel Mueller and President Trump. The questions in question in the subpoena battle are part of a list of more than 40 questions which Mueller reportedly wants to ask the president. They range from an examination of the firing of then FBI Director James Comey. When was the decision made? Why? Who played a role? Also, investigators want to know what the president knew about outreach by his campaign to Russia about potential assistance to the campaign.
The questions are very dangerous for the president to answer.
Solomon Weisenberg, who questioned President Clinton in the late 1990s when he was Ken Starr's deputy independent counsel, believes Mueller already knows the answers to some of the questions.
It's a minefield. Any normal white-collar client, his or her attorney would be jumping up and down on the desk insisting that they not go in for an interview.
Not surprisingly, President Trump had a strong reaction to the publication of questions that special counsel Mueller was reported to be interested in asking him as part of his investigation. The president tweeted, "So disgraceful that the questions concerning the Russian witch hunt were leaked to the media. No questions on collusion. Oh, I see. You have made up phony crime. Collusion that never existed, and an investigation begun with illegally leaked classified information." Nice. And also on Tuesday, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, under fire from congressional Republicans who have drafted articles of impeachment against him, said this about the threat of impeaching him.
I just don't have anything to say about documents like that, that nobody has the courage to put their name on and that they leak in that way. But I can tell you, there have been people who have been making threats privately and publicly against me for quite some time. And I think they should understand by now the Department of Justice is not going to be extorted.
Rosenstein, who's overseeing the special counsel's investigation, declared the threats will not affect how the Justice Department does its job on that case or any case. And in case you haven't had enough issues yet, the Washington Post is reporting that some legal experts believe two Justice Department opinions make it clear that federal prosecutors cannot charge a sitting president with a crime. Rather, those experts say the Constitution says it's up to Congress to impeach the president for potentially criminal behavior. Jeff, Lena, back to you.